Good evening, everybody. Welcome to our Friday night lecture series. Tonight we have Mr. Bob Keeran, who had just retired from the Water District 3 or 4 years ago.
2. 2 coming up on 3.
Almost 3. I've known Bob since I was in junior high. We've been best buds for quite a while, and he's a neighbor. And when I kind of took over the lecture series a few years ago, I thought, maybe in 3 years we'll get Bob Keeran.
Yeah. Say something positive about me, will you?
So anyway, thanks for coming tonight, and I'll turn it over to Bob. He's going to talk about water in the Coachella Valley.
Yeah. I have a fairly strong speaking voice, so I will stay away from the microphone. Welcome. Thank you for coming here this evening. Yeah, the presentation is water in the Coachella Valley. You know, we're a desert, and if it wasn't for water, we wouldn't be here, quite simply. Throw out a couple fundamental good things to understand. First of all, we're a desert. Okay, thank you for coming. But why are we a desert? And the reason why we're a desert is because of these mountains around us. And we call this the Coachella Valley, but these mountains around us were not created like a valley was, because valleys are created hydraulically. A river runs through and cuts the valley open, and you have your sides on it. This area was created seismically. And if you're a little bit aware of plate tectonics, the idea that there's big pieces of the earth that are in parts and are moving up against one another, the San Jacinto Mountain, which is directly out over here in front, is on the Pacific plate, and the Mount San Gorgonio in the Santa Rosas is on the North American plate. So this valley here was created seismically, and those mountains block rainstorms that form over the Pacific coming east. That would be the main source of precipitation in this valley, is storms happening over there. Because the mountains are there, the precipitation can't get here. We only have, on average, 2 to 3 inches of rain a year. That's why we're a desert. But interestingly, because of those mountains and because of our being low, our depth has actually been very fortuitous to our water situation in a desert. So with that as kind of the beginning block, there's a lot to talk about in water, so I'm going to go through it as quickly as possible. So the first thing we're going to do here is start off with this statement. The water fortunes of the Coachella Valley are due to, I say, these 3 things: geology, topography, and vision. Geology we're going to hit first here. We have groundwater, water underneath the soil. Topography, we're a low area. It actually made it possible to survey a path from off the All-American Canal to this valley and have that water get here entirely gravity flow. There is no pumping of it, it just flows downhill. And vision. You had to have people with the vision to see the potential of the area if water was brought here. So those are our 3 things. So I'm going to try to get through these things as quickly as possible. So what do? Well, we start at the beginning. 13 million years ago, this is where the Imperial Sea is, the Gulf of California. Right here is Yuma, Arizona, and here's Palm Springs. It used to be under the ocean, or on the shores of the ocean here. Now, over time, this Colorado River was doing a little excavation project. We call it the Grand Canyon. And where did all that material go to? It goes to the mouth of the river here. Let me pause for a moment if I can. It paused, great. So none of this was here. The Colorado was here. The Grand Canyon and stuff is up here along with other things. The Colorado, when it was wild, you would not recognize it as to what it is today. Because as it flowed down to this path here, it's the watershed for the area, at great pace, it picked up sand, mud, gravel, and because it was traveling quick enough, the river would carry it along. But when it hit the Pacific Ocean here, at Yuma, the water slowed down, the material dropped out. So over a period of about 10 million years, it separates this area here with all the material that it had picked up and dropped out from our area up here. So the two areas are now separated. And, sorry, let's go back. I've caught up with it, so we'll get through this again. And you'll understand later why it's important, why I'm going back this far. So as I said, here's Yuma. It's going to take all this material and it's going to put it in here, and here's Palm Springs up here. Now as it moves along and does this, separates the two areas. This is the Sierra Puerto Mountains in Mexico. And this whole area here dries up. This is the risen area. This is basically a big sand dune across there. And this is the Salton Trough, the lowest point being the Salton Sink, over 227 feet below sea level. Over the millennia, these mountains that are around us here eroded away. And it filled in this northwestern section of our area with alluvial material, the perfect material to make aquifers out of. So as it rains, water would gather up in the spaces in between, and because there was no outflow, it just built up and built up and built up. So now we have this big aquifer underneath us, lots of water, but then the river diverts again and it forms ancient Lake Cahuilla over that. And then the river will change course again in through here, because this is just sand, silt, and mud. And it's the high point. This is flowing on a high point. It is more severely downhill, a lower elevation, than is over here. It's lower than the ocean. So the Colorado naturally wants to take that path of going in, making the Salton Sink, or making the ancient Lake Cahuilla and flowing over. Now, 1905, they had a little accident, and it created the Salton Sea, but you can see what the Salton Sea looks like compared to the ancient shoreline of ancient Lake Cahuilla. That is 40 feet above sea level. It's not below sea level, it's above sea level. And this point right here, right about there, is the Bermuda Dunes Airport. So and this lake was over 100 miles in length and nearly 70 miles at its widest, and over 300 feet in depth. So, I mean, it was a huge freshwater lake. On the southern end of that ancient lake, it was filled in mostly with the sediment, mud, clay that was brought in from the Colorado River. Up on this end, most of the sunken area was filled in with alluvial material from the mountains around us, eroding away and filling in. Sand, silt, and mud, small particles, very tight together. In the Imperial Valley, starting right about the Imperial county line, you have no groundwater. There's no water in the ground. Why? Because there's no spaces between the clay and stuff for water to gather up in. But up here, rocky, lots of space, lots of water has gathered in. So, did I do this right? Yes, I did. Again, here's what ancient Lake Cahuilla looked like. Here's the Salton Trough. Here's the current Salton Sea. Here's all that in there. Okay, so now why does this matter? Oh, okay, this is just fun. The ancient lake left a telltale remnants of where it was at. It's called tufa. It's the water line. This is a calcium carbonate deposit that has formed on the side mountains here. This is out at Lake Cahuilla, and right there you can see the line of the ancient lake. And what's interesting is right where the ancient lake goes, behind the Trilogy project, is also where the Coachella Valley Water District put in their groundwater replenishment ponds. And why did they put them in here as opposed to putting them in other places? Where that ancient lake used to be, that clay separates the ground from the deep underground aquifer. There's lots of good water in that aquifer, but if it rains down over the clay, the water never gets there. This is just kind of fun too. This is Travertine Point down at the Salton Sea. And this is what, just 600 years ago, this lake was here. I mean, a bat of an eye. The Native Americans who lived here, it's in their bird songs, the ancient lake that was here before it disappeared. Well, and then of course the question, well, why did it disappear, Bob? Why isn't the lake still here? Once again, where the Colorado River was flowing was sand, silt, and clay. You throw in a rock at the right place, the water begins to back up, a little silt will drop in that opening, it'll cut its own new opening, and boom, now it's going down to the Pacific and not making a right turn into our valley. It was very unpredictable that way. Matter of fact, this is out at in the Salton Sea, Dos Palmas. It's a preserve. It's at 112 feet below sea level. There you can see the Salton Sea out there. So this would have been all part of the ancient lake as well. If you go out there, you'll see the sand, and you see all these little white things all over it. And if you get up close to them, you'll see that they're shells. These are the shells of the creatures that used to live on the bottom of ancient Lake Cahuilla. And they actually used to be all over. You know, all the developed area used to look like this. Yeah. There's a story that I believe is false, that that's how the Coachella Valley got its name, was through the word conchilla, which means white shells in Spanish. And I don't believe that, and I know what the actual story is, but that's another lecture. And this is how small these shells are. There's a dime. And what I find really interesting here is look at this shell right here, how small they were. There's just billions out of them. I can do my best Carl Sagan right now. There's billions and billions of shells out there. And this is how the lake would form. It would be there for a while because everything would flow here. Something would stop up here. The river would change course down here. The lake would dry up and it wouldn't be there for a while. River would change course, go in, form, back and forth, back and forth. So, there we go. The Cahuilla people have been here for at least 3,000 years. They knew it. Now, this is where it kind of gets interesting. Put this in your head, what I've talked about, groundwater in our valley. Nobody much cares about the desert Southwest in the 1800s. It's just a place to go through to get somewhere else. But it's decided that we need to really find a southern route for a transcontinental railroad. We already have the one up there, you know, goes through Utah and all that, but there's a lot going on in the south, Louisiana, Texas and all that, Port of Los Angeles. We got to find another route. So the Williamson survey comes through, 1854, and on there is a gentleman by the name of William Blake. He's the geologist, and he's the first person to write down the fact that this area, much of it, is below sea level. He also is the one who coined the term the Colorado Desert. If you've lived here long enough, as I have, quick side story, we used to listen to the noontime weather report on KWXY, and it would always be, here is your report for the Colorado River Desert. You know, never Palm Springs, Palm Desert. It was always the regional area of the Colorado River Desert. So he coined that term, found out that most of it, and he predicted that there would be artesian wells here. And that was important for the railroad. Remember, the railroad at this time is steam engines. Without water, you're not going anywhere, and there's only so much you can put in cars behind you. You really want to have regular stops. So, 1876, the railroad comes through, and with the railroad coming through, commerce begins. And what is commerce back in those early days at this time? Basically, agricultural production. Unless you're on the East Coast with a factory making something like that, anywhere else, you're growing something and you're trying to sell it somewhere, and so you need a way to get it to market, and that's what the railroad helps you for. Let me see, is it the next? Agriculture, artesian wells, whoops. Okay, no, let's go back. Artesian wells. What's an artesian well and why do we have them here? Well, an artesian well is a well that you will drill down, and once you get to a certain point, the water underneath is under pressure. And the water will come up out of the ground on its own. Now, the first wells that were drilled for the railroad were kind of shallow wells, 300-400 feet, not that deep. And the water that they were producing wasn't that much. There just wasn't that. And the places that they were drilling these wells were south and east of Indio. Well, most notably in a community then called Walters, today we know as something between Mecca and Coachella, there was some mining going on in the area, and the railroad decided, let's bring down one of those boring mining machines and dig a real deep well and see how much water there might be we could get if we dig a deep well. So they begin to dig, and a little bit further and a little bit further, and all of a sudden, after they got a little below 600 feet, ground shakes a little bit, and boosh, water just starts coming up out of the ground under its own pressure. That is an artesian well. That particular picture, let me point at the screen. This particular picture right here is an artesian well. So what has happened is, remember I told you there's an aquifer here, and you'll notice that the valley is sloped. Everything goes down to the Salton Sea, right? And I told you that up in this area, we had all this alluvial material come in with rainfall. And over the millennia, even though we only get 2 to 3 inches of rain a year, the water has built up, and built up. Now, water will percolate down, but once it gets to the point where it hits other water, it kind of wants to spread out. So it's going to transmiss or move sideways to the lower areas. And so that's what happens up here. Water falls on the ground, soaks in, it starts moving down toward the Salton sink. They're dry. And what is there, though? What was the problem with trying to drill the wells and not really getting any production? There's a layer of clay, 100 to 200 feet deep, or this, that is down underneath alluvial material that had grown into the area when the lake wasn't here. So you have water from up here percolating, and now it's pushing underneath that clay. So you have this huge body of water up here, the aquifer, pushing downward, and it gets under that clay, and basically it's put under tremendous pressure. The type of pressure that it would be at 40 feet. So once they got through that, the water is coming up on its own. And they said at Walters, where that first big well was drilled, they could fill 8 cars, train cars, water cars, at the same time because of the hydraulic pressure. So now all of a sudden, ding, 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 you got water. You got this really kind of interesting climate here where you can grow things at times that nobody else is going to have product. This looks like a pretty good area to start doing some agriculture. And so that's what happens. I really enjoy this picture right here because this is Indian Wells. I've been through here. So right back up over here would be the Bradshaw Trail and the Cook Ranch over here. There you can see Haystack before it was named Eisenhower. Yeah. Point Happy would be over here. So I want to show you this little video that the farmers in the area had started doing irrigated farming. And the last individual who tells you this story, I'm going to tell you his importance here in just a moment.
First bad party. Coachella Valley wasn't always like this. There's been a great many changes made since I came here 67 years ago. In those days, there weren't too many people down here, and those that were here didn't move too fast. There were a few farmers who worked their land from a small supply of well water. One fellow put in the first date palms, another the first cypress trees. Life was pretty quiet. But as more people moved into the valley, more wells were drilled and the water went down. We needed new water.
Okay, so that's where that gentleman there was Lee Anderson. He was, I'm trying to remember, I think he was the 4th president of the Coachella Valley Water District. And why he's important is, okay, before we jump into the Coachella Valley Water District, we're going to jump into Imperial Irrigation District. Okay, the Colorado is wild. It had in the past changed its course and flowed into Salton Sink. formed ancient Lake Cahuilla, river would change course again, dry up. In the Imperial Valley, somebody came up with a great idea, Mr. Charles Rockwood here. Hey, where the river is flowing just south of Yuma, Arizona. How many people have been down to Algodones or know where it's at in Mexico, right along the line? Okay, just below that, Mr. Rockwood here figured out, hey, I could get water to the Imperial Valley. And the way I could get water to the Imperial Valley is by making a little 6-mile long canal. Wait a minute, the Imperial Valley is nearly 80 miles away. How do you make a 6-mile canal and get the water 80 miles? Well, that 6-mile canal that I'm going to build isn't going all the way to the Imperial Valley. It's going to the dry riverbed of the ancient Colorado when it flowed to make ancient Lake Cahuilla. So he didn't have to do this big investment of making a big long canal. He just had to make the short investment. A couple issues with this short investment. Here it is he didn't have any investors in which to do it with. And then secondly, the area in which he was going to do this was in Mexico. It wasn't in the United States. It was down there. Enter this man right here, George Chaffee. Him and his brothers are the founders of Ontario here. He's from Canada. And interestingly, him and his brother, one of the problems Rockwood was having is everybody thought he was crazy. You're going to grow something out where it gets to be 120 degrees in the summer, and you're going to get the Colorado there, 80 miles over, and do it, and people are going to be able to make money, make a profit? Hard to get people to bite at that one. But Chaffee here had developed and created the first desert agricultural colony in Australia, in the Murray River. He knew it could be done. He made a fortune doing it. So he looked at Rockwood's plans, he went on the route and everything. He came in, he's the money man. And so this California Development Company is now going to be the first private agency to control the Colorado River and bring it great distances for irrigated farming. And here's their map. So up here's the Salton Sink. Here in Yuma is where they're taking water out down through here. Here's the Colorado River. Here's the little canal that they made. There's Pilot Knob. Well, why didn't they build it in the United States to begin with? This right here. This is the Algodones Sand Dune Range. And right in here, it stacks up a little over 200 feet up. So if you were to build a canal strictly in America, you're going to have to take it through this right here. And you just don't have the money at this time for that type of investment. But you do have the money to make this little chute over here. So they did that. They started selling land here in the Imperial Valley, and believe it or not, by 1905, there were 100,000 acres of irrigated farming being done here in the Imperial Valley. Way up over here, off the map, Coachella Valley, we got farming going on, but we're using well water. And that well water supply is beginning to drop. And we don't have near the scale that they have. Well, as I said, remember, Colorado is a wild river. Lots of sand and silt. That's how the land bridge was made. Well, you would have some times of the year where there was so much water coming down the Colorado, I mean, it's just, half-mile wide, not a problem. But there were other times when the river would slow down and there would be very little flow. And then the water that was coming along had all this sand and silt in it, and you took it over here and you put it into your canal here, and the drop on that canal is not as great as the drop on the Colorado River. So the velocity lessens. And what happens when the velocity lessens? All the stuff that's in there, the clay and silt, begin to drop out and clog up your canal here. And now you can't get enough water down your canal, and you got a bunch of people here crying, you promised us water, what are you going to do? Now remember, this is all down here in Mexico. Well, when it got down so low, they came up with an idea. Right here on the canal, they could build a cut. It's going to be about a half-mile long. And the elevation between here and here is pretty good. So you're going to be able to keep this water that's coming through this cut right here at a pretty good velocity. So it's going to keep all that stuff suspended in the water, and you're going to get plenty of water down and through here. But there's a problem with making the little cut across right here, right now. They can't get permission from the Mexican government to put a gate on it. They can make the cut across, but they don't have a gate on it. See, up here, this is where they have their gate for their main canal, and it's right here at Pilot Knob. And why is that important? Pilot Knob is the last outcropping of rock on the Colorado River. If you're familiar with the settling of the West, one of the points that you would cross the Colorado River is right here at the Yuma Crossing. And why would you go to the Yuma Crossing? Because at the Yuma Crossing, there's 2 granite monoliths on either side of the river. So the river is only going to be this wide, ever. Come in the spring melt, it's going to be this wide. Late December, early November, it's always going to be that wide. And when you build a gate on a river structure, you really do want to put it on bedrock. So you can control and it won't be undermined with the flows and stuff. But they're going to do this one down here, and it's just a cut through. They don't have, but it's no problem because they're going to be doing it when the river is running at a fairly low velocity. When the spring melt comes, they're just going to push this thing shut. And then they'll go back to their gate. And in 1904, the plan worked out great. 1905 comes along, they're having the same issue. They do the cut here. But what happens differently than had happened the year before, they had a midwinter rain event up here in Arizona, and a lot of water came down the Gila River. A lot more than they were expecting. And at first, the thought is, oh, this is great because we have more water coming through this cut here. This is the story you hear about the engineering accident that created the Salton Sea. The engineering accident is they could not close this cut up quick enough. So instead, the river cut a deeper channel right here because it was a lower elevation here than it was down here. And in a very short period of time, the river had changed its course completely. And it was flowing into the Imperial and Coachella valleys. It was doing what it had done in the past. It was going to create ancient Lake Cahuilla. And the California Development Company did not have the money to stop it. The only people that could have the money to stop it would be the federal government or some other large agency. And what is another large agency other than the federal government? Some say had more power, the Southern Pacific Railroad. So the federal government enlisted the railroad to close the gap to save the area. See, that's kind of a close-up of how it all looked right here. And you can see the sand dunes and you can see there. And that's what it ended up looking like. I mean, just huge. Yeah, you look at this and you understand why it was so difficult to close that up. In 1900, in Yuma, how much equipment, any type of, and when you pour the stuff in, it's just getting blown away. I mean, it's just, going for it. So they, Southern Pacific built this trestle across. They took every car that they had, and at Pilot Knob, there's a gravel quarry there. They just quarried off rock, gravel and everything. They put it on them. Over a period of several months, they were finally able to dump enough material here to control the Colorado again, to get it back into the old river channel and to keep it from flowing uncontrolled into the Imperial Valley. And that could have been it. That could have been it. The river would have been controlled, water wasn't coming in anymore, things bankrupt. We're just going to walk away. It's out in the desert. A bunch of people got together, though, and purchased the defunct California Development Company from the railroad and its subsidiary in Mexico, and they formed the Imperial Irrigation District. And Imperial's job was to contract with the government to control the Colorado River and to build a canal all in the United States. Say it with me together, an all-American canal. So if you ever wanted to know how it got its name, that's how it got its name. It's all in the United States now, as opposed to going into Mexico and coming back across. Now, now we're going to shift back here to the Coachella Valley. Because we've been doing irrigated farming, but we've been doing it with well water, and our aquifer levels are dropping. But guess what? If they build this All-American Canal, there's going to be a point where we can survey a path off that All-American Canal and bring water here via a 123-mile-long canal and have that water get here, once again, because of the topography of the area, entirely gravity flow. So now that we're using too much well water, the aquifer is dropping, we can quit using that source of water. We can start using the Colorado, and hopefully the underground will come back. And we'll be able to expand. So that's what happens. They formed the Coachella Valley Water District in 1918. Here we go. This is our underground, if you will. This is Windy Point up here. Down here is the Salton Sea. This is that aquitard. This area is a confined aquifer. This is an unconfined. Unconfined means anything that falls on the ground here ends up in the aquifer. Anything that falls here goes down and hits the aquitard and doesn't get any deeper. It stays up on top of it, and you have what's referred to as a perched, semi-perched water table in here. So there's the aquitard, and funny you should say that, because the aquitard is where ancient Lake Cahuilla was.
Oh my gosh.
And that is what a really healthy mecca. I don't know if you're an old timer here, you probably know the name of Ben Mosquito Abatement District. Not Ben Olson. I'll remember his name. He had the date farms down here. This is his family and their artesian well on their date farm down there. So the water district was formed. Now, our boundaries originally were, the water district boundaries were originally supposed to stretch up to Cabazon and all the way. But the district had to be made smaller because once they found the path to bring water here, it didn't get up to Palm Springs. It actually, if you're familiar with the canal, it turns at Indio and then starts heading toward La Quinta. So it was decided that who could get water out of that canal once it was built would be people that could receive water flowing downhill and 100 foot of elevation pumping it up. They figured you could pump it up 100 feet and use it for irrigated farming and it would be economically feasible. You couldn't pump it up 500 feet, 15 miles into Palm Springs and make it economically feasible. So that's the district was made small then. Interestingly, that agency, that small agency, this is where it gets into really weird stuff, not really weird stuff, very interesting stuff that we are still dealing with today. In order to control the Colorado River, build an imperial dam, build an All-American Canal, build a Coachella branch of the All-American Canal, you have to control the Colorado River. But the Colorado River is a water source not just for California in this desert area, but California, Arizona, portions of Nevada, Colorado, Utah, and I'm forgetting one state here, Wyoming I think is. So, and the way that water rights work is I could be down here in California along the river. I can make a claim to water. And technically, if I've made that claim to water on that waterway, if you are upstream of me, you have to allow that amount of water to get down to me before you can take water out, even though you're upstream of me. That's how water rights, if you will, worked. You know, it's the first one to use, it's the first one to receive the benefit of that. Even if you're further upstream. So the federal government had to come in and decide what each state was going to get, and then within the states they were going to have to decide who got went where, etc. Our agency was so small, the area that we were going to serve, and there were so few people. You saw less than 400 people decide to create this agency, that the federal government actually did not want to deal with Coachella as a separate entity. Instead, they wanted us to dissolve. I got to quit using us. I don't work there anymore. They wanted the Coachella agency to dissolve and become part of IIDs, so the federal government only had to serve one agency. But there were people that worried that if that happened, this area would be considered competition to that area there. And since they're the ones that started it, okay, maybe they'll do their All-American Canal, and maybe they'll do all their delivery canals for Imperial, but when it came time for Coachella, we'd be getting a bill to build a future project, but a project might not ever be built. So that gentleman who you saw, I said you got Lee Anderson. The board of directors had already decided to dissolve the agency. It was a done deal. It was going forward. Lee Anderson there got all the ranchers together and said, you know what they're going to do? You know what could happen? And in 1932, the entire board of the Coachella Valley Water District was recalled and taken out of office. And a new board of directors came in that insisted that the federal government would do a Coachella contract. And of course, the quick side story, we're reaping the benefits from that in some areas and not so much in other areas, because one of the interesting aspects of being an agricultural agency that's getting water from a diverted dam is there's hydroelectricity created on those dams. So you would be able to serve electricity in the area as well as water. But Fed said, no, you're too small. You're not going to get to do that, Coachella, for 100 years. And that's the 1934 agreement. And so if you've ever wondered, why is part of the valley an Imperial Irrigation District and the other part is Southern California Edison?
Yeah.
Right there. That decision was made right there in 1934, that the area that received Colorado River water would be served by Imperial Irrigation District, and the other part of the valley by other entities. But in 2034,
And then when
we'll have to wait and see, because the restrictions will be lifted. And the Coachella Valley Water District might be able to be a utility. Water. Okay, what do we have coming up here? I'm going to show you something here.
It has seemed impossible. But nearly 100 years ago, on January 9, 1918, the citizens of the Coachella Valley voted 324 to 49 to form the Coachella Valley County Water District. Dr. Jennings was our first board president. Our first lawyer was Thomas C. Yeager, who went to Washington, D.C. many times to lobby for Colorado River water. We negotiated the Colorado River Compact of 1922.
We were there.
That decided how much water each state would receive. We influenced the Boulder Canyon Act of 1928 that authorized the construction of Hoover Dam. In 1938, the Coachella headquarters was constructed by the Bureau of Reclamation. Construction on the canal started that year.
Out in the sand.
In
Just sand.
1941, World War II halted work on the canal. But work resumed in 1944. The canal was completed in 1948. Construction included underground delivery pipes and irrigation meters. However, there was another issue looming.
Most of the soils in this valley contain salt.
I'm going to talk about that a little bit later here. So that kind of semi takes us up to where we are today. The interesting thing, there was a portion of that video that talked about the 1922 agreement, the Colorado River Compact. That's when all the amounts of water were decided, who was going to get what, and that's when it was decided what Coachella was going to get and what our water right was going to be. But it took a while for the canal to be built, as you heard there, because of the war. Once the canal was built, farmers started switching over from groundwater to canal water. Agriculture expanded here, and the groundwater levels recovered. So a very interesting lesson there learned by the local agency. Never rely on one source of water. Don't rely just on groundwater. There's other places. And another interesting aspect of the 1922 agreement, which kind of flows into why we're having so many, I won't say, there's so much conversation about the Colorado, is that 1922 compact agreed to how much water each agency was getting. They made those divisions at a time when there was actually a very wet period of time, so technically there was more water in that 10-year period that they decided to give water out of than actually flows there on average. They kind of learned that pretty quickly after they had made it, but for lack of putting it a better way, nobody really cared because nobody was here. So the 4.4 million acre feet and the 2.2 million acre feet there and everything, nobody was using those amounts of water to begin with. So it wasn't an issue then. Now as time has gone along and everybody's using all their allotments, now is when the issues come up. And everybody had their own interpretation of what the agreement said and how much water they were supposed to get. And it's like I said, that worked out just fine until there was really push comes to shove on how much water was really available. There's the canal, there's that. See, this steam shovel here, electric steam shovel, that was actually used not only to build the All-American Canal, that's what they're building right here, but it was also used to build the Panama Canal. It was disassembled and brought up here to do that. As I said, you can see all that was sand. Interestingly, the largest water conservation project ever done on any of the Colorado system was done in 1980 on our canal. If you've crossed over the Coachella Canal in Indio and stuff, you'll see it's lined with concrete. But back in the day, when it was originally built, the first 87 miles were just built out in the sand. And the first 50 miles of the Coachella Canal used to lose 132,000 acre-feet in a year. Acre-foot, 1 square acre, 1 foot deep in water, 132,000 year to year, because it all got seeped in here. This is really getting the weeds, it'll only take 1 minute. But thanks to the 1974 Salinity Control Act, the first 50 miles of the Coachella Canal were lined. Wait a minute. 74, salinity control, what the heck is that? 1974, Mexico complained that the water going into Mexico was too salty. It was too salty because all the ag agencies along the Colorado River would use water on their land, and then they would let the water, after it came over their land, flow back into the Colorado as drainage. That drainage water had salt in it. So now by the time the water got down to Mexico, the salt content was so high that it couldn't be used very well for irrigated farming. What to do? Federal government got a great idea. We'll build a desalination. So the process began and completed in, I think it was 1990. The world's largest desalination plant was located in Yuma, Arizona, to take drainage water that was going to come out of the Welton Mohawk Irrigation District, desalinate it, and put the fresh water back in to meet treaty obligations. Okay, it's going to take us a while to build this. We don't have all the technology. We got to clean up the water right now. Okay, we'll just take the water, and rather than putting it in the river, just let it go down to the Pacific Ocean through the Colorado River, make a bypass. Can't do that. Why can't you do that? All the water is accounted for. Even those farms that use water, hypothetical. This farming agency next to the river uses 10 waters, but it's only supposed to get 8. But of the 10 waters that they give, 2 of them flow back in as drainage. They've only used 8. So they have to have that credit for everything to balance out. Keep on. So what are you going to do? Our general manager at the time, Low Week, says, hey, feds, if you line the first 50 miles of our canal, you save 132,000 acre-feet. You have all the water you need to get that desalination plant built and go ahead and let the salty water go down before anything. Win-win. Okay, we'll do it. So we got the first 50 miles lined for free by the feds. And then in 2006, the last remaining section was lined, and now the entire canal is lined with concrete. And I apologize, I have taken too long. That's what the old canal used to look like, right there, going out over the desert, when they surveyed the new path. And you can see here how all the silt was getting in there. This is why you had so much loss, not only evaporation, but drainage, water weeds grew. It was a mess. But today, this is what the Old American Canal right here, it was lined with concrete in 2009. There's the old canal. Here's the new canal. This is the starting off the Old American Canal of the Coachella branch. You can see it right there. Right there's the old canal. It was built side by side. So water comes through here. This is kind of interesting. About 12 years ago, Coahuga mussels were found in the Colorado system. The ag system for Coachella is all underground. If Coahuga mussels get into the water, we're in trouble. We don't have Coahuga in this water here. How come? You have it here, why not here? Because right here is a giant chlorinator. We dump huge amounts of chlorine into the water here to kill any quagga mussel that could make it past that point. Next little side note, you've heard recently they might possibly close Lake Kauai for recreational use. That's why. The water agency, there's the All-American, that is demanding that if the county's going to run it, they take responsibility to make sure that no quagga get in there. And if any quagga gets in there, it's going to be a multi-million-dollar. So they don't want to take the responsibility. They don't want to continue with the lease if it's going to have that on it. Da-da-da. So that's what that is right there.
May I ask you, do
Yeah.
they cling to boats?
Yes.
Because
And
we
that's
have
why you
that
have,
problem.
that's why you have all out throughout
Yeah.
California, you've seen the whole, like you can't transfer a boat from one body of water to another
No.
without super chlorinating the hull, going and getting out all the ballast water and everything. You know, just a little ballast water in the boat can create
Yeah.
tremendous issues, i.e., have you ever been to the Salton Sea? If you have, you've noticed all the saltwater barnacles that are around the Salton Sea. Have you ever wondered how saltwater barnacles got there? They got there from the ballast water in the pontoons of airships that landed from San Diego over at the naval station that used to be on the, at the Salton Sea during World War II. You know, so you introduce just a little something and it just takes off. We eventually put in the most advanced control room, the most in the world was there. That's what it looked like most recently. This is what the delivery system, this is what makes the Coachella system far superior than any system on the entire Colorado. Water flows via gravity to underground pipes, and then it's delivered to the high point of every 40 acres. And you can see in this detailed, there's over 1,200 accounts. A little over 342,000 acre-feet of water was delivered in this particular year. The amount of loss, water that's somehow unaccounted for, is less than 1% on the delivery system. It's better than any other. And you can see here what this map is actually telling you here. This is the lateral, the meter, and everything else that goes with that. And that's what it kind of sort of looks like. If you've been down to the ag area and seen all these white pipes, that's how, so the water is actually running underground. You can't see the delivery pipe, but then you have these things right here called baffle stands. And what a baffle stand is, it's like a big concrete glass. Water's coming in on this side, and water's going to go on that side, down to the next farmer. But in between this opening, that opening, in the concrete glass here is a wall. And because the top of this wall is lower than the canal, the water comes into this point, it fills up to this side, and it spills on over and goes down to the next delivery. Here now, though, because it's above ground, you have some head pressure. And on the side here, you have a little valve. And the guy who's called the Zahn Harrow, he goes out and turns that valve. It has a little meter on the top of it. See, that's how it looks right there. We had a flood, and you can see how it goes in here. Then there's a wall. That's the top of the wall right there. There's the little valve right there. So when he opens it up, the water shoots up, goes up through that U, and through that meter, and then out to the farmer.
Is that the high point in that spot?
That's the top of the wall right there. Right there. So as you can see here, you probably have about 5 foot of head pressure right there. So it pushing down there, and so when it gets to this meter over here, it comes out and then it goes on out to the farm. And this is the beautiful Coachella Canal right down in Mecca. About 4 years ago when we had a wildflower bloom. You can see all the sand verbenas along here.
Beautiful.
And the great thing too about farming here today is over 50%, nearly 60% of all irrigated farming done in the Coachella Valley is now done via micro irrigation. Little tiny drip emitters, irrigation pipes in. The first guys to start it were our great people here. We have a big, beautiful area. I have gone way too long. And this is where the canal ends. There, once again, is PGA West, and there's Kauai, named after ancient Lake Kauai. And in fact, there again, you can see the ancient water line right here at 40 feet above sea level. Right up there in the little canyon, there's a 10 million gallon reservoir that the water district serves fresh water to PGA West and other areas. Let's see what else we got here. This is how we deliver water.
Here at the Water Service offices in Coachella, a farmer called in and we use water will take its order. Farmers will order in 24-hour periods and in increments called minor inches. 50 minor inches equals 1 cubic foot per second. His order is downloaded onto the mainframe computer, and then it is radioed to each individual Zontero's truck. The laptop
There it is.
that is in his truck will have the
Zonjero, Spanish for ditch rider.
so
Goes back to the original Spanish land grants.
delivery point. He will check his laptop computer, make sure how much
Turn-ons, turn-offs for the day.
ordered. He'll then get out and grab his valve wrench and head over to the underground valve to turn on the water for that particular farmer. The valve box is locked, so only the Zonjero can turn on and adjust the valve.
Yeah. Not that a farmer would do that on his own. It's important actually that they don't, because you have to keep the system balanced, and somebody opens up, it messes everything up.
And volume. There's the volume. You'll then adjust the valve until he gets the proper flow. As I said, there's the flow needle. It's delivered in cubic feet per second, and that's divided up into minor inches. Every 50 minor inches equals 1 CSF. He'll continue to adjust the valve until he gets the proper flow rate on the registry there. After he has the proper flow rate, he'll make a notation.
There we go. You'll do that, and that's how they make an accounting for every drop of water. I apologize. I have questions.
Now, do all the developments, the big developments, they have to apply for water credits, and they only get a certain amount depending on
No.
their usage? How does it
No.
work?
Right now, the Coachella Aquifer is regarded as an asset for all to use. So anybody who wants to drill a well, they can drill a well. Anyone who wants to Colorado River can, if they're in the area where the canal can deliver water to them. But it can't be. It's like you couldn't up here in Palm Desert say, I want to get some canal water. We don't have a way. There's no way of getting it here to you. So you have to be with it. Now, the interesting thing about, can you drill a well? Yes, you can. But once you get to the point where you pump more than 25 acre feet of water out of your well in a given year, you have to pay the water district to replace the water you've pumped. You don't have to pay for the water, but you have to pay for the program that replaces that water that you've taken out.
So say there's a big new housing development on the side. How do they apply for it?
They would, if it's a big development, they just go to developmental services at the water district, and they work out where it's going. And today there are over 75% of all your water use is actually outside of the home.
Oh, right.
So there have, over the last few years, been put in place regulations of how much water you're allotted for your outdoor water use. And the Coachella Valley Water District was really on the spearhead of all that. They began this process. The first book they wrote was called Lush and Efficient, a word that was coined, and this was done back in 1986. And the whole term, lush and efficient, means just that. It's a plant that looks lush, looks tropical, looks very green, but yet uses just a small amount of water. And we had to write the book because the Bible at that time for gardening in the Southwest was Sunset Magazine's, Guide to Desert Gardening, which was great if you were in Phoenix or you were up. Those were all high deserts. We're a low desert. We're the Sonoran Desert. We're the Colorado Desert within the Sonoran Desert. We are the lowest, hottest place other than Death Valley, which there's not a lot of people in, a lot of people trying to live there and grow things in the country. So we wrote this book specifically with a plant palette that would survive the summers here. And then we did it with a gentleman that was just absolutely fabulous. His name was Eric Johnson. He was a editor emeritus with Sunset Magazine. And he basically wrote much of the plant palette that's used by all the desert communities here. Palm Desert was kind of on the spearhead of it. And if you ever get over to, at the end of El Paseo, there's that French restaurant there, and there's a desert garden there. That's the Eric Johnson Memorial Garden. That's how important he was to the bringing into that plant palette there.
So all the 200 golf courses that are in the area,
What's
they each individually have a contract with the water district?
Everyone who drills a well and pumps more than 25 acre-feet of water has to pay to have that water replaced.
Okay.
Okay? What the water district has done though too is they have recycled water.
Yeah.
You know, the first recycled water use in our valley was in 1968 at the Palm Desert Country Club. You know, which is decades before San Diego and other places even got involved in that. So there's a tremendous program in place right now where they're trying to get most of the golf courses off of groundwater and instead using either recycled water or a blend of recycled and Colorado River water. And so if you use Colorado River water, this is referred to as, I'm going to introduce you to a fancy water term here. It's called in lieu recharge. And what that means is if you pump water out of the ground, we have to put it back in. We have to recharge it. In lieu of, instead of taking Colorado River water and replacing the groundwater you pumped out, we'll just bring the Colorado River water over, which can't be used for drinking, but it can be used to irrigate the golf course. So why would you use water that you could drink when you can use the other? So in lieu of, we give that source, and there's a program in place where they should have a little over 90. They're a little behind schedule. And if you want to talk to me later, I'll chew your ear off. Anyway, any other questions? Yeah.
So does the water for residential and business use, like in Palm Springs and Palm Desert and areas west of like Indio and Coachella and that area, does that come from the unconfined aquifer?
Yes.
And is that going down, going up?
That's why I was trying to stick mostly with the canal. There are no less than 5 major water agencies in our valley. The Coachella Valley Water District being the largest, the second being the Indio Water Authority. Thank you. And of course, Palm Springs is celebrating Desert Water Agency, their 50th anniversary. And it's a whole nother lecture, a fascinating story of the lesson that was learned with the canal was used groundwater, water dropped, got canal, brought canal water, started using canal water, aquifer came back up. Lesson learned. In the late 1970s, the economic teeterboard shifted. For years and years, agriculture was king in the economy. At that time, it began to shift over to tourism resort living. You know, today, agriculture is still $1 billion industry, but up this way, it's, you know, close to an $8 to $9 billion industry. Because there's a lot more going on up here. So when that started growing and happening, the water table did begin to go down again. Oh, that's okay. We'll take the Colorado River and we'll bring it up here. Colorado River is only entitled to the area that the canal could deliver that. So you can't use that source of water. What to do? The state was doing its own state water project. Take water, store it up in Lake Oroville. Well, over the last few years, heard of Oroville. Bring it down in an aqueduct system, bring it to communities that had paid for that system. Desert Water Agency didn't exist before 1960. It was a private company. But agencies that wanted to get that water from up north had to be public, not-for-profit entities. So legislation was formed. All those private companies were dissolved and put into the Desert Water Agency, who became a state water project contractor.
So you're saying Palm Springs and that area are on a whole different...
No, they're all on the same aquifer.
Oh.
But in order to replace the water that was being taken out of their aquifer, they couldn't use Colorado River water. Instead, they were going to use water from the state. How many people have left the valley in the last 2 weeks? Anybody? On Interstate 10. If about 2 months ago, if you went across on Interstate 10 and you went over the Whitewater River how much water did you see under there? Nothing, zero, nothing coming out. If you were there last week, you saw 500 cubic feet a second flowing underneath.
Oh, my goodness.
Now, where did that 500 cubic feet a second come from? That state water project. We needed to build a canal from San Bernardino to the valley to get water from Orville to the valley. Too much money, can't do it. Paid to be part of the project, not only Palm Springs, but Coachella Valley as well. We both are contractors. Where's our water this year? Here it is, Coachella, come get it. We're not making a pipeline to San Bernardino. Metropolitan Water District of Southern California, the largest water agency in the country. Also, when we were building the canal and the Hoover Dam was being built and all those things, they wanted to get water from the Colorado River as well, and they built the Colorado River Aqueduct. If you go over to Parker Dam, you'll see these big old pipes, 6 of them, coming out, and that's where their pump station is. And they pump water out of the Colorado River there, and it goes through a series of open canals and underground tunnels. If you've left the valley going east, and you get out just about where Desert Center is, and you look to the north, you see that building there with those pipes going up the side of the mountainside there? That's Colorado River water going out of the Eagle Mountain Tunnel up to the Coachella Tunnel. And there is a tunnel that travels underneath the mountains over here and actually goes underneath Mount San Jacinto.
You're kidding.
And at the Whitewater River, though, it goes through what's called an inverted siphon. Fancy way of saying a tunnel that goes under the Whitewater River. Okay, here's the Whitewater River channel up the canyon. Here's where the aqueduct comes in here. Here's the aqueduct over here. Well, it's above the base of the, so what do? We build a tunnel underneath here, and because they're both at the same level, it's just like it's flowing across here. Why is all that important? Instead of building our pipe from San Bernardino here, we took the water that we were supposed to get and gave it to Metropolitan, because Metropolitan has a connection already. And what they do is they give us that same amount of water that we were supposed to get from up north, and they put it into the Whitewater River out of their aqueduct. And so that's why you saw 700 cubic feet a second going out. And where do we put that water? We put it in percolation ponds, and we put it back in the ground. 2 years ago, me and Rob went up to, 3 years ago, we went up to a theater in Los Angeles to see the classic movie Chinatown. And anybody who's familiar with water in California, Chinatown is just a thing, Jake. And I heard something, it's a brilliant movie. They still teach the movie in film school because it is the most concise script ever written, they say. That literally everything that was in the script was used in the movie. There was nothing more that was needed. There was nothing less. It was just brilliant. And one of the lines, and the gist of the matter is they're trying to get more water in, and to prove that they need more water, at night, the water company was wasting water. They were wasting water, and so then the next morning when people would need water, they say, oh, we don't have any water. We need to build this other project so we can get more water here, because we don't have enough. Just see, there's nothing. Then at night, they flush it all out. No, we still don't have any water. I'm simplifying it. Right? It's a film noir, and it's wonderful. Well, one of the things that the main actor who was doing this talked about the water. He says, you know what we're doing with the water? We're putting it on the ground. We're letting it percolate down. There's no evaporation. We're storing the water underground. And that never clicked with me. I mean, that movie was all those, that's exactly what we do here. We don't put water in big lakes where it can evaporate away at a rate of 6 feet. We put it under the ground. No loss through evaporation. Purifies itself by percolating through the sands. And then it's there when you need it. And that agreement has worked out so well because not only do they get the yearly entitlement, but Metropolitan actually uses our aquifer as a bank. So when it's a really wet year, like it was about 6 years ago, they fill up every pond. They can percolate into the ground 1,600 acre feet of water a year into the ground when it's fully operational. but then they can let it go blank for years at a time and just live off of what's been banked. I'll take one more question if somebody wants to. Okay.
The recycled water, when's that coming, and is that going to be expensive?
The recycled water is coming. Recycled water is only going to go to major water users, i.e. golf courses, and what they generally do is you have to sign an agreement, or agreement has to be signed, that says you're only going to use 20% of your golf course water, and don't hold me to this, I've been out of the thing here for a couple of years, fresh water out of the lakes, and 80% is going to have to be recycled, and the price is going to be based on a little less than what it currently costs you to pump water out of the ground. And the reason for that is, there's going to be a little learning and all that, but it's a much better water source to use.
When is it happening?
What's that?
When?
It depends on where you're located. Depends on. Well, where it's happening right now is, see, the plant, the recycled water plant is at Cook Street and the Wash. So in order to get water, everything is kind of uphill at that point. So there's going to have to be some pumping stations and a few others put in place. Your local water, Coachella Valley Water District, I'm sure be more than happy to talk with, give a timeline, but they're working on doing that. And I want to thank everybody who came here tonight. It's been 3 years since I've given a presentation, and I'll tell you what, I can keep going. I'm gonna hang around up here. I know it's Christmas time, you got much better things to do, but anyone that has any other questions, come on up. Thank you very much. Thank you, Rob.
Excellent.